All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our Harass-MAT, Preventing Harassment and Discrimination in the Workplace webinar. We are going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to start us off with a brief video from our sponsor for this webinar, which is Sutphin. So hopefully I can get this to play so you guys can see a video from me.
Value of trust. Since 1890, our company has been built on those principles. Today, nothing's changed. We are Sutphin Corporation, and everything we do represents our commitment to providing you with the most dependable and durable fire apparatus possible. After all, our name is writing on it. Sutphin is extreme duty all the time. Every apparatus is meticulously engineered and custom built from the ground up, using only the highest quality materials and components. From the planning and configuration, all the way through to the build process and final delivery, every step of the experience is customized specifically for you. You aren't just a customer, you are part of the family. At Sutphin, we believe performance and innovation is critical, which is why each apparatus is built to work as hard as you do. Our expert craftsmen work to ensure your truck is built to last, serving you and your community safely and efficiently for years to come. We are with you every step of the way. And it is our goal to forge a relationship of superior service and support that is as strong and long-lasting as our family name. We've been around for 128 years. That's the past, present, and we will be here for your future. Sutphin, strong, stable, and committed to the fire service since 1890. Innovation, craftsmanship, family. It's what makes a Sutphin a Sutphin. Since 1890, our designs, our products, and our family have remained strong, stable, and committed to the fire service. Today is no different. Designed through meticulous care and preparation, along with unparalleled engineering, the new 108-foot aluminum rear-mount Sutphin SLR 108 ladder puts firefighters first. With 2 sets of underslung outriggers for quick, compact setup, this apparatus can arrive on scene and deploy with the touch of a button. Once on scene, the new SLR 108 pushes boundaries and accounts for the obstacles and unpredictability presented by every fire. With short jacking capabilities, the SLR 108 reduces an already narrow jack spread and enables your truck to reach into tight alleyways or narrow streets, bringing flexibility and fire sense to every truck. Complete with a minimum aerial complement of 115 feet of ground ladders and room for long-handled hand tools, ladder storage creates the compact, low-to-the-ground area for deployment. The standard SLR 108 is configured to have a 2,000-gallon per minute pump, a 400-gallon water tank, and 1,000 feet of 5-inch hose, all without sacrificing truck company functions. Uncompromised and unmatched, the Sutphin SLR 108 brings over a century of design, craftsmanship, and experience to your department and your community.
Okay, so we thank Sutphin for their sponsorship, and now I'm going to turn it over to Eric Rossoff and Brian Cummings.
Thank you very much. Let me get my screen share going here, and we're going to do that. How's that look so far? Brian, give me a...
You look great, Eric.
Great. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here, everybody. My name is Eric Rossoff, and I own this small company called the Career Survival Group. And I'm proud to say, since about 2009, 2010, we've had the fantastic opportunity to travel all across North America and do a presentation called Career Survival for Firefighters. This has been a very rewarding experience, and I'm very proud to say that just this last February, we completed our 105th agency-wide training across North America. We've been I'm in Los Angeles right now with Chief Cummings, and we've been as far as Orlando, Florida, up to Toronto, Vancouver, Seattle, and places in between. And it's just been just a fantastic experience. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about me in just a little bit. And how I got this company started. But before I do that, let me introduce you to what I promise will be the more articulate part of today's conversation, and that's Chief Brian Cummings.
Articulate's a little bit of a stretch. It's pretty early here still in the morning in Los Angeles. But thank you for having us here with the Ohio State Fire Chiefs. Like Eric said, my name is Brian Cummings. I did 34 years with the Los Angeles City Firefighting Department. Good size agency, about 3,400 uniform members, 400 civilian employees, running about 500,000 calls for service every year out of 106 fire stations. So a lot of sets and reps of doing a lot of stuff. But the thing that kept me awake at night in 2011 when I made fire chief wasn't the fact that the bells could go off in any one of those work locations and my folks might have to respond out to any one of a wide variety of emergencies, because I knew they were tactically proficient and operationally sound. What kept me awake at night is I knew there was some behavior that was probably going on in one of my work locations that I wasn't going to hear about for 3 weeks until it was splashed on the front page of the local newspaper or on the nightly news. And that behavior was going to impact the reputation of my department, the careers of my firefighters, and possibly my career as well. Well, in 2012, Eric came and presented Career Survival to the Los Angeles Area Fire Chiefs Annual Conference. And I saw right away the value of that training in getting ahead of those behaviors and preventing our folks from doing those career-ending mistakes. So I brought that training back to the LA City Fire Department. Well, when I retired in 2014, Eric asked me if I'd like to come on the road with him, and I leapt at the opportunity. As he said, since then, we've been crisscrossing the North America, and I know that we're impacting firefighters' careers. I know that we're saving some careers. So we're gonna have you for a couple hours today on this webinar. Like I said, we're gonna give you some good information, some actionable information, and hopefully entertain you a little bit. So thank you very much again for having us into your homes.
Okay, so the entertainment part of this actually starts now, and I'm going to tell you that I'm a police officer by trade. And even though we're on a webinar, I can hear the groans, that are coming from all across Ohio right now about what does this mouth-breathing, donut-eating, knuckle dragger possibly have us to do, tell us about what we do. And that's a really legitimate question. Let me tell you about how this whole thing kind of developed. I worked at the Burbank Police Department in the Los Angeles area. I was a police officer for about 31 years. I retired about 6 years ago at the rank of lieutenant, had a very nice career. Burbank's about 10 miles due north of downtown Los Angeles. It's a little kind of enclave in Los Angeles County. About 160 officers in a 17 square mile city serving about 105,000 nighttime residents. My career was very basic. I got hired, they put me in a police car. After a little bit of time on, I made training officer, and I got to train new officers out of the academy. I promoted and went into our detective bureau, and I was pretty flattered because my first detective assignment was in what we called our robbery homicide detail. And generally speaking, brand new detectives didn't get to work in what was considered a pretty elite detail. I like to think I had a body of work that would suggest I'd be good at it, but looking back at my career, I think maybe I was just standing in the right place at the right time. I've got the distinction of being the Burbank Police Department's first ever gang investigator, but back in those days, we couldn't call them gangs because the Chamber of Commerce didn't like that. So we had to refer to criminal street gangs as unauthorized youth groups. Yeah, I can't make that stuff up, right? So like the Boy Scouts, that was an authorized youth group, and the Crips and Bloods were unauthorized youth groups. So I spent a little bit of time as a detective, and then I promote to sergeant. And there might be a parallel, right? Being a sergeant in a police department and a lieutenant or a captain in a fire department, frontline supervision. I like that job. I liked it a lot, as a matter of fact, because those of you that have done it, you know that there's something about that frontline supervisor where your boots are still on the ground. You're still doing the job you signed up to do, But instead of being responsible for your own thing, you're kind of responsible for a team of people. And I really like that. As a matter of fact, the longest block of time I stayed in one rank in my career, I spent 16 years as a sergeant. Well, things are going along pretty well for me. But then, you know what, I had kind of an event that happened in my personal life that had a pretty profound impact on my professional life. And I think this is one of those cultural differences between fire service and law enforcement. I got divorced. And I know that, Brian, that doesn't happen with firefighters too much, right? Yeah, listen. Anyway, I got married relatively quickly after I got divorced, and my new wife and I, we have a baby on the way. So dad needs a little bit more, you know, what we call purgeable dollars, retirement dollars going into the bank. And I also need a much more stable working schedule. So I take our lieutenant's test. And a lieutenant might be about a parallel with a battalion chief, a line chief in fire service, you know, front line of management. So I take the test, and my chief calls me in and says, "Congratulations, Eric, you came out #1. You did a great job. I'm going to promote you. I'm promoting you today, and I'm going to put you into internal affairs." So, I really don't want that job, chief. And he looks at me and says, "You don't want this job, Eric?" And I said, "Well, all due respect, sir, I really don't want to work internal affairs." And he looks at me and says, "Good, because the last person we want to put into internal affairs is someone that might want to work internal affairs." There's none of us that sign up event, you know, when we first come in and say, "I want to be a firefighter, I want to be a police officer." There's none of us that put our name on that piece of paper thinking, "I can't wait to get to work today so I can do an investigation into the person sitting next to me." If you are that person, you're some type of a loop. But we understand that we are stewards of the public trust. Fire service, law enforcement, we are meaningless without public trust. And to be able to maintain that trust, we have to commit to do those investigations when necessary. It's just, please don't make me do it. And he says, "Eric, you got two things going for you as I put you in this assignment. First, it's not a lifelong thing. You'll be in there 2.5 years tops. And when I rotate you out, you know, you can pick whatever assignment you want to go to, and I'll put you in that assignment." So it takes the edge off a little bit. And then he looks right at me and he says, "Eric, you know what your greatest asset is for going into internal affairs?" And I'm kind of stupid. I think he's going to say something like, "Oh, you have the respect of your peers and others." No. "You know what your greatest asset is?" "No, sir, what is that?" And he looks at me and he says, "You don't have a lot of friends here anyway." I go, "Well, yeah, thanks a lot for that, Chief." So how does that little trajectory end up with me having this, you know, wonderful opportunity to travel across North America and speak with firefighters? I fell into this. You're talking to one of the luckiest people you're ever going to meet. In California, there's a law called the Police Officer Bill of Rights. And what it says is, if you're a police officer and there's going to be an investigation into an allegation of misconduct, labor-driven state law says how that investigation must proceed. The police officer has rights, and it's the agency's responsibility to make sure that those police officers are afforded all of those rights during every phase of the investigation. Well, my agency made sure that I was an expert in that law. Well, around 2007, California passed a brand new law called the Firefighter Bill of Rights, which was almost word for word the same as the Police Officer Bill of Rights. So overnight, I became an expert in this brand new law for firefighters. But the law caught many fire departments off guard. They didn't know how to do these investigations. So my little entrepreneurial light went on. And I thought I might have some information local fire departments need. And this whole thing started in 2007 with me going from one agency to another, because it was a lot of word of mouth advertising, and helping those agencies with their investigations. I wouldn't do them. I would just show them how to do the investigation. Excuse me. It became very popular very fast. The phone was ringing. So I was landing at several different municipal and county fire departments and fire districts. And as I was going to these places, I noticed a pattern, because everywhere I was going, I was reading cases or being briefed about cases where a firefighter or firefighters' careers were in some sort of peril. And you know what? There were absolutely patterns. It didn't matter what the patch said. The story was always the same. And I put them into two categories. Category one was show them the door. You know, you read about it, and if it was true, this firefighter acted with malice. They had intent. They committed a crime. And if those allegations are true, we should show that firefighter the door. But overwhelmingly, when you heard about these cases, and even the way that they were being described to you, that was a good person having a bad day. that there wasn't malice involved in it. There wasn't like a criminal intent or anything. As a matter of fact, frequently you found out that it was a firefighter or firefighters who were engaged in some type of behavior that only, a few years ago, nobody really even cared about. And today, very good firefighters' careers were in peril. So I got a little bit interested into that, and I started to do some research. It was simple at first. It was, Google searches and Yahoo searches with keywords like firefighter fire, firefighter terminated. I bought into a website that's called LexisNexis that actually does a little bit of a deeper scrub. So every day I would wake up, I'd have these email alerts waiting for me. And, there was newspaper articles or other documents talking about firefighters losing their jobs. And what did I find out? Sure enough, show that person the door every now and then, but overwhelmingly, it was, a good person having a bad day. So eventually I reached back out to Chief Cummings and I said, hey, Chief, I think we're fighting this from the wrong end. I don't think we're being efficient here. I think what we should be saying is instead of doing better investigations, what we should be actually saying is the best investigation we do is the one we never have to do, because we alerted all you good firefighters out here. Here are the most common behaviors that are going on all across the country that are costing good firefighters their jobs. Don't engage in these behaviors. And that became career survival. Now, today's class, we're going to focus on kind of at your level, at the chief officer level, the number one thing that's costing supervisors, chief officers, chiefs their jobs, and that's the workplace. But I think hopefully you'll agree with us at the end of this presentation that if we can get a better handle on the workplace and use tools that are already in place related to the workplace, we're going to have a positive impact of the entire culture of compliance within our agency. You're muted, B.
Sorry, thank you. Often in
Yes,
these,
that's the chief. Ladies and gentlemen, the chief.
But when we sit through these, and we all sit through these classes all the time, when we talk about harassment, discrimination, sexual harassment, retaliation, and most of the time we have maybe an HR professional that's in front of us, and we're sitting there with the other city departments, or we'll have an attorney come in, and they're telling us the law, and they're kind of giving us these theories and all of these rules about how do we apply these things, and we're trying to think, how does this work in the fire station? So what Eric and I have done is said, hey, let's reframe this entire narrative. Let's look at what we do really well in the fire service, and that's that operational side of the fire service. We're really good at operational survival. So let's consider getting that administrative compliance, the compliance to the rules, by using that operational mindset, that decision to train as if our lives depend on it, because they do, because we know that decisions affect outcomes, and the way we train affects our decisions. So as we look at that operational mindset, all of us come to work every day with that mindset that not on my watch. Not on my watch is anyone going to be injured or killed. Everyone that started the shift today gets to go home when the shift is over. And we do a lot of things to make sure that that happens. We look around our entire nation, and if there's an incident with a bad outcome, we bring the lessons learned to our folks so that they can have the best tools. We set very clear operational expectations, SOPs, SOGs, strategies, and tactics, what we want our folks to do on scene at an emergency, and then we train to those high level of expectations so that when we get on scene at an emergency, we know that the application is going to be in line with those expectations, because that's the safest place for us to be. And then we hold each other accountable, supervisor to subordinate, peer to peer, and subordinate to supervisor. Everyone is a safety officer. Everyone is making sure that everyone is being held accountable. When we frame up the issue, when we look at the operational versus administrative stats, tragically in 2019, we lost 57 firefighters in the line of duty. That it's tragic, but it's really good. We've been trending downward for a lot of years now, and it shows how that operational emphasis is working for us. But when we look at the other side of it, we've tracked over 400 terminations from the fire service in 2019. And that number doesn't include those folks that got in trouble and retired in lieu of a termination. And it also doesn't include those bad individuals that somehow made it through our system, got hired, and then broke the law and did bad things once they were on our job. The commonalities in these 400 stories is that when you read it, you absolutely see, hey, that was a good firefighter having a bad day, or a good group of firefighters that got wrapped up in some groupthink situation that they thought might have been humorous or of no consequence, and they didn't understand the risk until we were already showing them the door.
And I know that you all know this as we're talking about it. Chief Cummings and I would never compare the tragedy that it is of a line of duty death with somebody getting a piece of paper that says you don't work here anymore. But I think every one of you would agree with us that somebody getting a piece of paper that says you don't work here anymore, that generally comes along with a devastating impact to that firefighter and to that firefighter's family. It can have a devastating impact on the morale of the entire agency frequently. So it's not a line of duty death, but somebody getting a piece of paper that says, you know, you don't work here anymore. That's a significant moment in our culture to the individuals. We care about our people. We don't want people to get hurt. And that moment with a piece of paper that could have been avoided, that's a tragedy as well. Absolutely, positively, we've been cataloging and gathering this information, like I said, pretty heavy since about 2009. And for anybody with bugles on your collar, you know, some type of in supervision, chief officers losing their job, the workplace is positively the #1 issue that's out there, the career survival factor that's going to cost you your job. That's harassment and hostile work environment. Hostile work environment being the focus today. If we can get our hands around this idea about a hostile work environment and avoid a hostile work environment, that's the moment that we can take out the entire rest of the things that come along, such as, you know, harassment, discrimination, retaliation, and such. It's all steeped in the hostile work environment.
So as we were looking at a comparison and we tried to think about what the operational type events are most similar to these workplace environment issues, Eric and I came up with HAZ-MAT incidents because they have a lot of similarities to them. First of all, we know that hazardous materials incidents are dangerous. But a lot of times the hazards may appear harmless, odorless, colorless substances that are nonetheless bad for our folks. We know that in those hazardous materials incident, it's an aggregate of exposures, of little exposures a lot of times that affects our folks rather than that one-time acute exposure. We also know that if the incident gets too big for us, and we're going to lose control of that incident. Maybe the state will come in with an asset, even a federal asset may come in and take that incident off of our hands. And because of all those dangers, we do things like meaningful training. We have first responder operational for all of our folks. And then we use placarding systems as a warning, like our 704 diamonds, which we put on outside of facilities to let our folks know if there's a fire in that building and there's a certain set of numbers or letters on there, we need to have a higher level of concern as we're thinking about it and a higher level of safety.
And when you look back, take the history of HAZ-MAT. This is evolving and it continues to evolve, but I'm assuming that there are many of you in there that are watching us today that have 25 plus years on the job. And think about your first car fire that you went out on. And what did that look like? You know, probably somebody jumped out of a rig. They put their melon inside the car with a fire extinguisher. They put out the fire, whatever kind of mop up was going on. And then you all went back to the station and you stayed in your turnouts, right? And you went into a common area, the kitchen, you know, the TV room or whatever it was. But you think about your firefighters today going on a car fire and it looks like they're on a lunar landing, you know, and those turnouts, we do the best we can to keep them away from the common areas because just like Chief Cummings says, there's no such thing as a harmless exposure. You know, it's odorless, colorless, but back in the day, you know, well, that's what we do. But the unfortunate reality, as we all know, and, you know, there's a body of work that absolutely sustains or will let us know that this is true, is that the generation of firefighter before this generation, they're dying from cancer because we didn't understand that carcinogen, you know, that we were consuming those, we were absorbing those. And just like the chief said, it was the aggregate of exposure to those things, those little, what we thought were harmless things down the road manifest themselves as a true danger. Well, as we were, again, you know, coming up with this training and looking for that operational comparison to an administrative issue, HAZ-MAT became exactly the right thing to do, we think. As a matter of fact, before we actually came up with this specific training, the way it all came out was we were walking through it at a training and Brian kind of just jokes. He says, you know what we should come up with, Eric? We should have placards for fire stations that say, you know, warning, you're about to walk into a hostile work environment. I think, Brian, you took it even farther, right, about the individual
firefighters. If we, you know, those two firefighters that you have that just don't mix. If we could put placards on firefighters that say, "Hey, these two guys are volatile when they get too close together," it'd be easier for our officers.
Yeah, don't put these guys together, man. It's going to explode. So we joked about it, and I actually, a couple of days later, I was having dinner with my wife, and I said, "Hey, Brian came up with this great idea," and she looks at me. She goes, "Hey, that really is a good idea, Eric." So I called Brian back, and this is what we came up with. The administrative comparison to HAZ-MAT is what we are now calling Harass-MAT. And we're both pretty happy with the wordplay right there. So we're going to give you a moment to give us a little bit of love. And we've come up with a placard that Chief Cummings will explain to you in just a little bit. But we've done after action reports on literally dozens and dozens and dozens of lawsuits that have come out of fire departments, just fire departments. And like you do critical after action reports, you know, when it comes to operational things, we don't have lawyers or HR professionals do critical after action reports to operational things because they have no operational background. They don't know what some of those things mean. So we like to think when you take a fire chief and someone that's had their boots on the ground and start to do that after action report related to an administrative thing, we might be able to offer some nuance, a little bit deeper into what the issues might be. And here's what we've come to find out. There's similarities there between HAZ-MAT. First, when you look at it, frequently the things are what got it all started were those harmless things. There were the banter that goes on in the fire station sometimes, like, you know, brothers and sisters, we're dusting each other up. Nobody means nothing by it. You know, nobody's offended by it, but it's still, you know, that little language that's out there or that display that's inappropriate, even though it's funny, you know what it is? It's an administrative carcinogen. It's out there and it's being consumed and absorbed by the workforce. Because then when you get a little bit farther into the after action report, we find out that most of the time, the bad thing that's going to happen to the firefighter, the fire chief, the whole agency, it's an aggregate of exposure to this. Because when we end up, like it says there on the third slide about, or this third bullet point, if it gets too big, we give up control. In a hostile work environment, when you're giving up control, that means you're in state or federal court, and we no longer have control of it. And what's going to happen is in state or federal court, the taxpayers around you are going to look at, generally speaking, anywhere from 24 to 48 months of behavior of little things that have been going on inside your work environments, that aggregate of exposure. So what we decided was, just like the evolution of HAZ-MAT, first and foremost, we have to do better training at this. I think you're going to agree with me that the training that we're doing is cursory at best right now, especially given the consequences. Good people are losing their jobs. It's costing agencies millions of dollars annually. It's, it impacts it's stressful. Morale gets ruined. The consequences are very high. So we have to do better training. And right now, across the country, it seems like the only training that's available to you is corporate or cubicle training. And you don't look anything like cubicle training. Think about the incredibly unique living, working environment that is the modern fire department. And you're getting training about somebody that punches a clock. We're missing that point. And then we have a placard, a subtle reminder in strategic places around a work environment that hopefully kicks in everybody, but certainly targets your frontline supervisor, your lieutenants, your captains, to remember that there might be something, like the HAZ-MAT placard says this conveyance or this building might have something we have to pay attention to because it could be dangerous and it might not present as dangerous right away. Put these around the station too that says there might be something dangerous going on here that doesn't present as dangerous right away. Why is this so dangerous right now? You're getting sued. Fire service across the country is getting sued. There's a workplace lawsuit being filed against a fire service agency every 12 weeks. That number is going to go to 10 and probably even 11. Once the lawsuit comes, it's game over. We're no longer insulated. It's out there. It's out in among all your taxpayers. You know what happens too is, and I would encourage you to encourage those around you, please don't get caught up in the motivation of the person that files a lawsuit. We all tend to do that. You hear it all the time. Oh, they're playing at this card or they're playing at that card. Now, Brian and I have done enough research into this. You better believe we've run across what I would refer to maybe as an exploiter, you know, somebody that's using their protected class status to shield themselves from, you know, any number of things that might be going on in the agency. I think that happens. But also make no doubt about it, we've read many, many, many cases where people are absolutely exposed to a hostile work environment and harassment inside our agencies. And frequently those people, they're not bad employees. They just don't feel empowered to be able to tell anybody that, hey, you know what, I'm offended by this. Once that lawsuit comes to, there's going to be incredibly intense scrutiny as to what's going on inside each one of your work environments. Under pain and penalty of perjury scrutiny, you know, by subpoena scrutiny. And the end game, what we're trying to avoid in all this, obviously, is all of these things, win, lose, or draw, you know, on a lawsuit. The process is incredibly stressful. It's incredibly costly. Absolutely, positively, you're going to be in the newspaper. So there'll be an impact on public trust. And it also impacts recruiting. Brian and I frequently are talking with agencies that are doing the best they can to make their agency, they have a mandate. Let's make the agency look more representational of the community that we serve. And we're struggling to find, whether it's female firefighters or whatever it might be. So we come out with one of these things in the newspaper and we just lost our ability to try to recruit from the community. You're muted again, Brian. That's two. I'll give you one more. And listen, any of you chiefs out there, I'm actually looking to replace Brian. So if you're about to retire, you know, you can reach out to me after the presentation.
Nice. I'm unionizing. Watch it. When we get that intense scrutiny, though, after a complaint or a lawsuit, they literally lift the top off of our fire stations to observe all that behavior that's been going on inside. And we find that scrutiny reveals, as we do these after action reports from these, it's an aggregate of behavior, small, seemingly inconsequential things that add up to these work environments. Rarely, we don't often see that one egregious event because we catch those. We generally catch those egregious events and we stop that behavior and make sure it doesn't go on. So we see it's an aggregate of behavior. We see that the plaintiff, that's the person that files a complaint or files a lawsuit, we find out that they were engaged in the behavior themselves. Either they just ignored it, they gave tacit approval by turning their back and ignoring it, or they were willfully participating in themselves. They were telling the joke, doing the display, going along to get along. They felt that they were telling people, hey, I'm not politically correct, and it's still against policy. We find out that there was a belief among supervisors and the members that they could waive policy. All of us are together in this, and none of us is offended by it, so that's okay, even though the policy says it's wrong. Well, that's not true. You can't waive policy. And we almost always find that the supervisors participated. Again, either by willfully participating in the behavior themselves or by giving tacit approval, running and hiding in their room and putting their fingers in their ears saying, hey, the firefighters are about to get involved in some shenanigans. I don't want to be any part of it. I'm just going to hide. So we see all these things with scrutiny, and we learn even further. Next slide, Eric. I think the next one's me. Yeah. When they're looking at the behaviors in our fire stations, things like this come out in the trial. This firefighter was egregiously harassed and won close to $1 million in the lawsuit. But how do you think this testimony, the jury thought of this department when this came out in testimony, that as part of while they're supposed to be viewing their harassment training, they were also watching it on a split screen while they were watching NASCAR. That's the kind of buffoonery that just adds extra zeros on the end of those awards and makes the public think, of course, this is exactly what happened, because they don't really care about this. They're not taking it seriously.
On the same line, this is one that we researched a while back. There was an Egyptian heritage firefighter, took a promotional exam, didn't pass the test, filed a lawsuit. And then there was a testimony of pervasiveness that as soon as we start to scratch the surface, every day this firefighter came to work, there was some display or language related to the fact that he was Egyptian. And that display and language went all the way up to the fire chief. and references to totally inappropriate things, and that the guy never complained about it. Sometimes he would be the person that initiated it, but that doesn't matter anymore. Though at the end of the day, that's that carcinogen. That's that thing that we're just not supposed to be out there. And that's the type of thing that we're supposed to stop from happening. So at the end of the day, the jury gets a hold of that and says, well, that's contrary to their policy. That's contrary to their expectations. They're not supposed to be doing that. There's a $250,000 settlement. They were forced to promote the firefighter. And it ended up, there was probably a reason he didn't pass the test. He didn't have an aptitude for the job he was trying to promote to. So in lieu of actually giving the firefighter the responsibility, what they did was they just paid him. So he's still a firefighter making supervisor pay because they don't want to give him the supervisor responsibilities. And there was a couple people had to retire in lieu of being fired. And there was a captain that was fired. It's all fun and games right up to the point that you're getting this piece of paper that says you don't work here anymore.
And this is another one. A firefighter wasn't selected for a special assignment, a very coveted assignment, and filed a discrimination lawsuit. And the things that came out in deposition were, there were frequent jokes being told, including by the firefighter that filed the suit, but just kind of exaggerating the differences between male and female firefighters. Things that were said just kind of jokingly in passing, but again, that drip, 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 drip that was constantly in that environment. And now there's a special assignment, and there was no other reason why this firefighter didn't get it. And the testimony looked back and saw that pervasiveness. There was that constant undercurrent of saying, oh, that firefighter can't do it. They just can't do the same level of job. And then they didn't get it. And it ended up in a $600,000 settlement. A battalion chief retired in lieu of, and a fire captain and a lieutenant were fired. So again, these things, that pervasiveness, even when we think it's harmless, it's inappropriate in the workspace. If we're telling jokes pertaining to any protected class, even if the person in that protected class is telling that joke, it is against our policy. It's against federal law. We need to knock that stuff out and make sure it's not happening. Recognize it and stop it as soon as we can.
Why are you getting sued so much right now? There's actually some statistics, and I think it's an important part about understanding as the culture, is moving forward, how that's all impacting us. The first reason you're getting sued so frequently now is the changing workforce. Statistically speaking, across the country, if you're going to be facing a workplace lawsuit, the average amount of time on that the employee has when they're most likely to sue the agency is from the academy to about 5 or 6 years on the job. And you can start to do that math, right? You can see that here comes this workforce that more than any other time in your history is willing to expose your inside the station behavior to the outside world. And who's here to greet them, right, is the rest of us that were brought up at a totally different time in a totally different place. Hey kid, hold your mud. What happens here stays here. If you got a problem with me, you bring it to me. And that's changed a little bit. What goes hand in glove with that is the changing jury pool. You no longer have the post 9/11 jury. The post 9/11 jury loved you. And it was tough to find an attorney that would even take a case against a fire department, much less a case, hey, they're talking mean, inside a fire station. But overwhelmingly, the juries have, moved from being sympathetic to the agency to sympathetic with the employee. If you do your own Google search on fire department harassment suit, you're going to see agencies paying out millions of dollars annually for basically a fact base that says we were talking mean inside a fire station. You don't have that post 9/11 jury. It says, hey, I don't care what you do in a fire station, as long as you come out and do that hero stuff that you do. Those days are gone, right? And now it's just a totally different group. And here's what I'll get sometimes, because people recognize, that I'm just a police officer. I had to actually work. Sorry about that, Brett. But they'll say, hey, Eric, there's no way for you to understand this, because you were never a firefighter. But it's just me and 3 and 4 other people in a fire station. I know my folks, they trust me. We put our lives in each other's hands every day. Yeah, we dust each other up a little bit, but nobody's offended and everybody's okay with it. And it'll never get out of my unit. There's no way. If somebody has a problem with me, they'll bring it to me. And what if it does get out of my unit? I'm an officer, I'm a captain, I'm a lieutenant. We're talking mean inside the station. There's no way they fire me for that. I'll get a spanking, but they're not going to fire me for that. And I got to tell you, and I hope you understand it, and I hope everyone that works for you understands it, that's a dice roll at best. And do you want your career to be on a dice roll? I use this example from the Blue Angels. Hopefully you can see the graphic there. But the headline was that the Blue Angels chief fired for allowing porn and explicit speech. You know, he's the #1 plane in that picture. He's inverted, you know, at 600 miles an hour, a few feet off the bottom of another plane. I mean, I'm not a pilot or nothing, you know, but that's got to be dangerous. Not like fire department dangerous, Brian, but dangerous nonetheless. And, you know, that's a small group of people, you know, putting their trust, you know, lives in each other's hands. Sure. How does it get out of that person's unit? It's not going to get out of one of your fire stations. You know, it could be as simple as the person on the #2 plane wants to be the person in the #1 plane, you know, but it got out and it cost that pilot his job. I think the most important part of this picture when we do training, live training, is I'll look at every one of your frontline supervisors and ask them, how long did it take the Navy to replace that pilot? And I would ask any one of your frontline supervisors, your company officers, say, hey, Captain, if your chief had to fire you today for a workplace thing, how long does it take your agency to replace you? And it sinks in. You know, we're not taking the rig out of service. Now, everybody that worked for that captain might say, oh, this is a bunch of baloney, and there's a double standard here, and boy, I can't believe it, what a bunch of baloney. But the end of all that rant would be the realization of, but don't do that. You know, and now we have this, that's the legacy of that person. Could have been the best operational person you've ever met in your life, but this is what's ending their career right here.
So let's look at that operational survival now that we do so well. Again, only 57 line of duty deaths out of 1.1 million firefighters last year running millions of calls. And then see if that operational survival, those keys will inform our administrative survival. The first key to keeping our folks safe on scene in emergencies is to recognize and respond to those dangerous situations that gets them injured or killed. And then once we recognize those dangers, we need to train so that we can respond to them with a balance of both courage and skill. Now that courage piece, they already demonstrated. You don't get to wear that badge and that patch unless you have that inherent amount of bravery, that ability to stand fast in the face of danger and continue with cognitive thought. When everyone else in our communities are running away from that bad thing, you and your folks are running towards it to put yourselves between it and the community that you serve. But we know that courage alone isn't enough to keep our folks safe. They also have to train for that skill set, that reflex response that leads to safe situations when we get to those dangerous places. Because we know in a crisis, we're not going to rise to the occasion. We're going to default to our level of training. So we want the level of our training, that expectation of the level of that training at such a high level that it results in a reflex application that's always a safe operation.
If you look at career survival, it's a, well, maybe, there you go. Now let's look at career survival. This whole thing is just foreign to me. See, I'm a police officer. This is all, there's like technology involved here. This is like tough for me.
Put a donut on it.
Oh, there it is. You want to say it again, Brian? So everybody out there's laughing now. You got over on me.
Thing about donuts, I did not.
Yes, now I'm totally lost in the whole conversation. Career survival is exactly the same formula that all of your folks are so passionate about when it comes to operational survival. The first is recognize the danger. Now, you and everybody you work for, I hope, understands that the workplace could be a dangerous place to careers. However, frequently what we find out is people get complacent about that, about the workplace stuff. It won't happen to me. It won't happen to us. You are uber diligent about not allowing your folks to get complacent about operational issues because the consequences are so high, and complacency leads to tragedy. Because of the consequences of the workplace, what I would ask is that we start to build that culture that, you know, we cannot be complacent about this. And one of the ways that we overcome complacency is that sets and reps training. Now, just recognizing something's dangerous, that's not survival. We also have to be able to count on our folks to respond with that balance of courage and skill. Now, career survival courage is a little bit different than the operational courage Chief Cummings described, but it's undoubtedly in every one of your workplaces, because career survival courage is the courage of integrity, the courage of character, the courage of being able to step up every now and then and say, hey, you know what, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. And in what Brian and I both know to be a very courageous event, it's for a firefighter to be able to step up in a room full of people and say, hey, you know what, this might not be such a good idea, maybe we shouldn't do this. Your agencies are steeped in character and integrity. There's no way that you hired those people without the requisite amount of character and integrity. But I think you might agree with us, what we don't get is a lot of sets and reps training. Sets and reps training at the workplace, at career survival. And that's today's conversation. Can we get that reflex response? So when the bad career thing comes and we filter it through the character that's in every one of your stations, we don't have to worry about somebody rising to the occasion. What'll happen is they will, in a reflex, make a better decision and hopefully help people around them make better decisions as well. We would like to get that same, reflex response.
So there's a couple of common factors that I want to talk about as we look at some of these work environment issues. The first is normalization of deviance. That's when we do something the wrong way. We do something that's outside of policy, that's against a safety rule, that's outside of a system, and yet we have a positive result. We start normalizing that wrong way in our head. Another way of saying it is good luck reinforces bad performance. It starts to lead to the things that we call predictable mistakes when we're operating outside of policy or against rules, and then something bad happens. We see it a lot of times in after-action reports for firefighter injuries or fatalities, where we'll see companies that take bad tactics into small fires, and the small fires go out, and they normalize those as being sound tactics until they come up against a more complex incident. In the workplace, it's where we have things that we're doing against our policies or our rules, but you know what? No one's ever gotten in trouble for it. It's just kind of the way we do it. And again, that's setting us up for those predictable surprises. The next factor is groupthink. Because of the commonalities of all of us that come to the fire service and the monolithic group that we are, we tend to think alike. When we're in our small crew size units, in order to minimize conflict, we start to rationalize dysfunction. I know what we're doing is wrong, but none of us is bothered by it. So what could be the harm in us doing this? And no one's ever going to find out because it's never going to get outside of our unit. This is an example of that groupthink. This is a group of firefighters at a two-story single-family dwelling. It's burning to the sticks. They're transitioning from offensive to defensive mode. And the gentleman in the center of that picture was his last shift, the chief. And they thought, hey, let's take a picture as we're doing this transition to memorialize his last fire on his last shift. And this ended up in the paper. Not the best image for us. They could have waited until the fire was out. I've got to think one of the people in that group there could have thought, hey, you know what? How about we just finish handling this emergency and cease the damage that's ongoing to this building, and then take our picture for ourselves, for our own self-aggrandizement and memorializing this incident. So that group think, when we're in our group situations, we just go along to get along, and it leads to these situations. Also, when we're looking at it, we find that there's generally a triggering event. It's all good until it's not good anymore. We've been doing this forever and no one's ever complained, but then something happens. And that event can be an actual or perceived discriminatory action. When we talk about discrimination, it's a work decision that's made. Someone didn't get a promotion or a transfer or a key assignment, or got promoted, transferred away from a key assignment. Or there might be a change in relationship. Maybe there's a falling out in the crew. Maybe there's some pending discipline action for one of the members on the crew, or some perceived slight that's gone on, either on or off duty. And now it causes that individual to look back at all of those violations of policy, those little things that have been going on for months, sometimes years, and saying, hey, you know what? They did all of that because all of these things have happened. All these harassing and hostile things have happened.
Brian and I have both come to the realization, having sat in trainings related, because we're in California, related to the workplace. So pretty much if you've got a pulse, there's some type of action that you can take against an agency related to what's going on in the workplace. But for all the training that we've sat in the past, what no one ever covers is, let's allow our frontline supervisors to do their job. So here's what we want to actually establish is the fact that not everything is harassment. Not everything that's going on in the work environment would be considered hostility. I think what we've done along the way, because we haven't done meaningful training, is we've almost handcuffed your frontline supervisors. Because you know what we hit them with the HR term, the attorney term is zero tolerance. Zero tolerance, zero tolerance. So I come into a station and I say or do something that by itself is out. It's not a hate-based rant, but it's inappropriate for the work environment. And I think our officers think, oh, I'm supposed to call the chief now. They're going to come back at scorched earth, you know, and so we just don't do it. And now that carcinogen is just out there and nobody's done anything, you know, to get it out of the work environment, and it just keeps on building. The operational comparison, and we'll use this with your, and we suggest you use it as well with your frontline supervisors, lieutenants or captains, is a trash can fire. If I was to ask any one of, let's say a captain, any one of your captains, whatever rig they're on, except for the truck, right? The truck doesn't go out, Brian? Is that what happens? I don't know why the truck doesn't ever go. Sorry for any of you that were truck people. I don't know why that's funny, but Brian told me that's funny. Anyway, we'll ask them, can you go out into the field and put out that trash can fire? Do you need any help? Do you have all the tools, all the authority, all the resources to put out that fire all by yourself? And they'll all right away say yes. And we say,
there's a police car blocking it.
Say, unless there's a police car blocking it. Yeah, because that's what we do. But there's a comparison there to the workplace, because when you do an aggregate of, you know, you do a historical look at workplace environment issues, frequently what will happen is they started out as trash can fires inside a fire station. The frontline supervisor had all the tools, all the authority, all the resources to put that trash can fire out, but they didn't. And when they didn't put the trash can fire out, it became a hostile work environment. But had they put it out immediately, it wouldn't have become hostility. Probably among the most important things that we should be discussing related to workplace environment training is what's not harassment, but we never talk about that. This is the first page of federal law. And you know what they do in the first page of federal law about harassment? They talk about what harassment isn't. And the reason they do that is in federal law, they put a huge amount of responsibility on frontline supervisors to maintain the workplace. And the reason they say what's not harassment up front is so we can empower those frontline supervisors to achieve those goals. Here's what it says. Basically, keep small things small. The law says petty slights, annoyances, and isolated incidents do not rise to the level of harassment, unless that isolated incident is like a hate bait, very severe. But petty slights, annoyances, somebody comes walking in and says, you know, boop, they use a bad, you know, fill in the blank. They use a derogatory term. It's not hate-based, it's just punctuation to a sentence like we always do. That's not harassment, that's not a hostile work environment, but it is a trash can fire. And your officers have to recognize it as a trash can fire and put it out immediately. The reason that they have to put it out is the very next page of federal law. That's where we start to define it. It says the conduct becomes unlawful when it's a condition of employment. I have to come to work to get my check. That's a condition of employment. And the behavior is severe. You know, somebody physically grabbing somebody, a hate-based rant against somebody, whatever it might be. Interestingly, in fire service cases, you hardly ever see severe cases because I think your folks recognize that and they respond to it pretty quickly. The next element is the most misunderstood one, and this is just bad policy writing and bad training. Many of our frontline supervisors think unwanted is when they have to start doing something. Somebody has to come up and say, hey, you know what you said just offended me, or what just happened, it was offensive. But you'll agree with me, and Brian will give you an example soon. There may be many reasons why people in our work environment don't want to tell everybody else that what just happened was offensive to them. But here's the problem, is that the law says severe unwanted, and everybody thinks it says severe unwanted and. It doesn't say that. It says severe unwanted or, and that or is an incredibly important word because it means it doesn't have to be severe. It doesn't have to be unwanted. All it has to be is pervasive. That's the third time, Brian.
Pervasive. Sorry, that's a third.
You guys don't know how much fun I'm going to have with this later on today.
Pervasive. How often in my work environment do I have to be subjected to that drip, drip, drip of seemingly minor, inconsequential actions, behaviors that a reasonable person would consider intimidating, hostile, or abusive before it's pervasive in my environment, before it's something that I see all the time in my environment? And remember that reasonable person standard, when they say that, they're not talking about any of us in the fire service. They're talking about the community we serve, and they hold us to a high standard. And unfortunately, our fire service culture in America predisposes us to creating hostile work environments slowly over time, over a matter of months or years. And a lot of times they seem like happy, high morale work environments right up until the point they become hostile. And I'm going to give you a quick demo of how that happens. Let's say that I work at a fire station with, well, I'll pick 3 of you in the front row sitting here in the conference. And the 4 of us, we are firefighters here in Ohio. And we're good firefighters. We work hard, play hard. We're just a good crew. And there's one thing that's different about me than the other 3 firefighters that I work with. I happen to be a Dodger fan. And they might have a team that they like better. I don't know, the Reds, whatever. So here's how it happens. I come driving into work the first shift of the month, and there's firefighter A waiting for me in the parking lot with a huge grin on his face. And I know he's going to take a shot at me as soon as I get out of the car. I get out and he says, "Good morning," and he blasts me right away about the Dodgers. West Coast team, no good. Those guys haven't won in forever. Come on board with the big red machine. And I give him some guff back about the Reds, and the day goes on. Later on, I meet firefighter B in the kitchen. He pours me a cup of coffee, and he blasts me about the Dodgers and being a Dodger fan, the Blue Crew, the Dogs. You know, and I zap him back about the Reds, and we laugh about it, and the day goes on. And finally, firefighter C encounters me in the evening and puts me to bed with one last good shot about the Dodgers. She gives me a pretty good shot, too, and I almost brings a tear to my eye. But I zap her back about the Reds as well. And all through the day, we had a great day at work. And those are all one-on-one encounters, real lighthearted back and forth banter. As those 3 firefighters reflect on their day, they think, you know what? Hey, I had a great day at work today. And I poked Cummings one time about that thing that we had that's different. But it was back and forth banter, and it was fun, all fun and games, no harm, no foul. When I reflect on my day, a little bit different take. I also think we had a great day at work today. But I got poked 3 times about that thing that's different. Again, not a big deal. It's just back and forth banter. It's what we do at work. Next day I drive into work, 3 more times. Next day I drive into work, 3 more times. At the end of a month, I've been poked 30 times about the Dodgers. I'm getting a little bit irritated about this, so I'm going to change my strategy. So when I drive into work that second month, and there's firefighter A waiting for me in the parking lot again with that big grin, I go on the offensive, and I zap him first about the Reds. But it goes the same way. Reds, Dodgers, Reds, Dodgers, Reds, Dodgers. At the end of 2 months, I've been poked 60 times. Boy, that didn't work. I changed my strategy again. I'm just going to ignore it, see if it'll go away. So for the 3rd month, I try ignoring it. Doesn't work. Another 30 times. It's been 90 times I've been poked about this. At the end of 6 months, I've been poked 180 times about the Dodgers. I'm pissed off. It's getting old. I'm done. You know, ignoring it's not helping. Telling people to knock it off. Zinging back isn't helping. Finally, that 7th month, I come driving in the parking lot, and firefighter A is waiting out there with that huge grin, and he's almost vibrating because he's got a really good Dodger shot to take at me. And he walks up, and I go, "Hey, knock it off. You're bugging me." So let's translate that. What did I just tell him in firefighter speak? I told him he's getting to me. There's blood in the water. It's on now like Donkey Kong. Firefighter A's giving me 2 shots. Firefighter B's giving me 2 shots every day. Firefighter C's that firefighter giving me 6. And it goes around the whole agency. I go to other stations and guys are giving me guff. The admin staff, the support staff, you know, overtime guys. Everybody in the county now is giving me shots about the Dodgers. I'm getting 70, 80, 90 shots a day. It's making me crazy. I come to work in the morning and I sit in the parking lot with this ball in the pit of my stomach, and I'm thinking, man, I've got to walk this gauntlet again. I'm finally, I can't take it, and I snap. And I go, "Hey, Cap, tell these guys to knock it off. It's inappropriate." And the officer does the right thing. He brings everyone into the lineup and says, "Hey, guys, knock it off. It's inappropriate in the workspace. No more joking around Cummings. I don't want to hear any more of that." Now let's translate that. What I say in firefighter speak right there. What's the locker room saying I just did? Can you believe that, Cummings? I thought that guy was one of those good Dodger fans. He just ratted us out to an officer. You know what? I knew that guy was a bad egg. I bet he's keeping a list. I bet he's keeping a list of everything we say and writing it down so when the chief comes by, he can rat us out to the chief. You know what? Don't joke around Cummings. That guy's a bad egg. He just wants to get us in trouble. Do not joke around him. And when people work overtime with us, we do what we do. We warn them. Hey, don't joke around Cummings. That guy's a bad egg, just wants to get us in trouble. And now that's Reds through the agency. And so I come to work in the morning, and that crew is sitting in the kitchen laughing, and I walk in the kitchen, and what happens? Crickets. "Hey, guys, what's going on?" "No, what were you guys laughing about?" And I walk out, and I'm scratching my head thinking, man, 8, 9, 10 months ago, we were a tight crew. We did everything together. Worked hard, played hard, fire EMS. And now they're not even talking to me. They think I'm a rotten guy. Slowly, drip by drip by drip by drip, our culture creates these hostile work environments, and we don't even see it until it's done. I always use a sports analogy when we do this anywhere, because it's innocent, innocuous, and fairly funny. But being a sports fan for any particular team is not a protected class. It ought to be, but it's not. So let's take that difference out of being a sports team, and let's make it one of those protected classes from federal law. So let's say I'm over 40 years of age. I'm Catholic. I'm a woman. I'm gay. I'm African American. Now, and all of our back and forth jokes are about those things. Now, all that banter is illegal by federal law, and it's against your policy. As you read your policy, you see that it says that each of us has a responsibility. If someone says something to us that's intimidating, hostile, or abusive, we should speak up and say something. You know, hey, knock it off. Hey, do you realize what you just said was very abusive to me? But chances are people won't say a thing. And the reasons are pretty, there's a lot of reasons, and they're pretty complex. Sometimes they won't say anything because they know, hey, you know, if I make a complaint, there's going to be an investigation, and somebody's going to get in trouble for it. And I don't want that. I just want things to go back to the way they were. They also think, you know, if I make a complaint, even though the policy says they'll try to keep the anonymity of who I was, I know that it's going to get out, because, you know, what's the best kept secret in the fire service? There are none. I make the complaint today, the whole county knows I'm that guy tomorrow, and then people start treating me different, and I don't want that. I think one of the biggest reasons that I've seen is because, you know what, I've wanted to be a firefighter since I was knee high. I want to prove to this crew that I deserve that badge and that patch. I'm going to go along to get along, give as good as I get, and I'm going to show that I'm part of this crew, a valuable part of this crew. And then as I get a little more time on, though, and I realize our culture, I know that, hey, if I complain, it's going to get worse before it gets better. So I just put on a bored face and hope, you know what, they'll get tired and get bored eventually if I show no reaction, and it'll be somebody else's turn in the barrel, and it's ollie ollie outs and free for me. You dig deeper in your policy, though, it says that if you're a supervisor, civilian supervisors, uniform supervisors, lieutenants, captains, chief officers of all ranks, you're required by law to stop it 100% of the time. It doesn't say, hey, only stop it if someone says it's not funny. It doesn't say, hey, only stop it if someone complains about it. It doesn't give you the know your audience exemption. You know, that's when somebody runs in with something really egregious to say and then looks around to scan the audience to see if there's someone from that protected class that might be offended. There's no exemption for that. In fact, there's not even an exemption if it's a protected class individual that uses the language or puts a display or does the behavior. It says stop it 100% of the time, because some of those protected classes, we'd have no way of knowing if our employees were in them, because we don't wear service stripes that say our religious background, our ethnicity, or our gender identification. And it's illegal in a work context to ask an employee questions about those things. So if we stop it 100% of the time and treat everyone with dignity and respect, we protect everyone. We have to actually make the trigger for our captains for that reflex response just language or displays that would be offensive, intimidating, hostile, or abusive to anyone. Because if we start thinking, if we put it through the filter of protected classes and start scanning our environment to see, hey, is there someone here that could be offended? We're way too far down the rabbit hole. It has to be that thing that a reasonable person, one of our officers says, hey, you know what? That's not appropriate in the workspace. Hey, knock it off. We don't do that here. We're better than that here in this agency.
Brian, you've been coughing a little bit, so I'm gonna. Sorry, guys. I've got way too much time on my hand here, fellas. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really sorry about that. Listen, I think too, one of the things that we want to talk about is the fact that Chief Cummings and I absolutely understand part of the fabric of who we are as an agency has to do with that we dust each other up. And we're not suggesting, hey, you can't do that. But what we are saying to you is we have to find a better way to do it. That if our dusting each other up includes, even though it's meant in love, but it's those words, the derogatory term, it's inappropriate it's a trash can fire. Nobody has to be in any trouble for it, but the captain has to be the one, the officer has to be the one that says, listen, I understand you guys want to dust each other up, but you can't use that language. I'm going to emphasize this one part, and then we're going to take a quick break. But Brian said it, and I'm going to restate it. You've all heard protected classes before. You've heard this term, and we focus a lot on that in whatever training you are getting, but it's a trap. Protected class is a trap. It's not that it's not important. Just like Brian said, it's incredibly important. But if we're filtering what's going on in the work environment through protected classes, we're leading our people into disasters. The reflex response has to be the word. It has to be the display, not who said it, not who showed it. Your captains, when they go out on a trash can fire, are they thinking about who started the fire, or do you expect them to put it out right away? And then we'll work on who started the fire. It's the same thing inside the fire station. It doesn't matter who started the fire. It's, hey, put out the fire. It's all about language and displays. It's that reflex response to the language and display. This isn't an easy get by any stretch of the imagination, but before the break, just think about it again. Operational emphasis. Why are you so good at what you do? We train to it. We make it meaningful. We honestly describe the consequences. And then what we do is we try to respond as a team to these dangers. And that's what we'll talk about after the break. Why don't we take about a 5-minute break here? Not so much because you guys need it that are out there. You've been taking a break the whole time we've been here. But Brian and I could probably use a little bit of a break. Thanks. Nice. Very nice, B.
Are we ready?
I think so. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Very good. Welcome back from the break. We're just gonna jump back in, Eric?
Yeah, let's get back at, well, what do you think? Excuse us, ladies and gentlemen, Brian and I are gonna have a little conversation here.
I think you should give the apology real quick.
All right. Are you sure I have to?
You have to.
Listen, Brian kind of insists on this, that since we generally have a captive group of fire service professionals, that I should offer you an apology from law enforcement. And it's a sincere apology. And I'm assuming that there's, again, many of you that are watching this, you have quite you have a lot of years on the job. But probably nobody's ever confirmed this for you before, and I'm going to go ahead and confirm it today. And I really do feel bad about it, but it really is true. In police academies all across the country, they give us a block of training of the worst possible place to park a police car at a fire scene. Now, you think we do that because we're stupid, right? And it's not that we're not stupid, but we do that on purpose. And you've all seen it before, right? You're going to a fire, and here comes a police car, usually on your right side where we're not supposed to be. We go past you because we're faster and more nimble. And then we'll turn down the street wherever the fire is at, and they show us in the academy, right? Proximity flames to hydrant. And we'll get to the closest hydrant to the flames, and we'll try to park the police car right on top of that. And then we'll get out of the car, roll up the windows, lock the doors, take the keys so you can't move the car. And then we try to hustle down to the corner before you get there. Now you're coming around the corner, and what's the cop always doing? Pointing, right, to where the fire, because how else would you all know, unless we were there to tell you. And the reason we do it is incredibly petty, but it is the reason that we do it. The look on your faces, it's just priceless. It's priceless, especially the folks that are driving the rig. You can see the veins in their neck pop out when they're like MFing us. You stupid, you guys are so cute when you're mad. Anyway, we're going to continue to do it because it's pretty funny, but I want to let you know that I'm sorry and I'll never do it again. If we ever get the chance to come out and speak to you individually or the group again, I'll share with you the 13 ways that they train us on how to wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning if we really don't need you for anything. It's like, hey, it's raining outside. I don't know, call the fire department. Okay, apology over, Brian. You're muted again. That's 4. That's 4.
Dang it.
I apologize for Brian too.
Yeah. So we're going to start as we come back here talking about our operational training, which we do really well, and see if we can use the same formula for our admin training. Operationally training, we acknowledge the danger in those emergency operations from the time we hire our folks. We instill a strong safety focus in all of our firefighters right from the training academy. And I talked about those high expectations we set, tactics, strategies, standard operating procedures, standard operating guidelines that we set for everything. We've got playbooks for every type of emergency to keep our folks safe. And then we have that meaningful training. Training as though our lives depend on it, because they do, to make sure that we have that reflex response in those dangerous situations. And when we're doing the seminar live, I'll always pick a junior firefighter and then a senior officer. And I'll say that they're working together on an engine company, and I'll do a hypothetical to show that reflex response. I'll say they're responding on an engine company to a fire, a structure fire. They pull up, they're on the front porch donning their SCBAs, about to go on the fire. And the junior firefighter notices that something about the senior officer's SCBA isn't connected correctly. Something in the back that the officer can't see is wrong. And if he tries to go on the fire, it may malfunction. And we asked that junior member, how long is it going to take you to let that officer know that there's a problem? And the answer always comes back instantly. Even if we pick a firefighter with 5 minutes on the job and an officer with 55 years, the answer comes back instantly, because we empower our folks to call those safety violations. We have that reflex response that is the expectation that everyone's a safety officer and will always do those things safely. So can that inform how we do administrative things?
And remember, it hasn't always been that way, right? But because of after action reports where firefighters were injured or killed on a fire ground someplace, and they came to find out that a junior firefighter saw the danger but didn't feel empowered to say something, you all changed that narrative. You changed it up and you changed that culture. It didn't happen right away, but you changed that culture. So from the academy on, just like Chief Cummings says, a junior firefighter would right away say, hey, there's something wrong with your equipment, or there's something wrong here, let's be careful. But let's flip that back over to what you're doing, or what most of us are doing administratively speaking. Do we acknowledge the danger? First off, nobody likes administrative training. That's for somebody else. There's no doubt about it. It's just boring, and that's not why we signed up to do what we do. But if we look at as in a comparison and see why we have some gaps in the reflex response, I think the first two things are the same, right? We acknowledge the danger, and there's no doubt in my mind that your agency sets a very high expectation related to the workplace. But here's where we start to get a little bit bad. Are you really doing meaningful training? Generally speaking today, workplace training comes in one of two ways, and it's delivered in some sort of increments, maybe once a year, sometimes it's every other year, maybe it's everybody, maybe it's just your supervisors, depending on what any state, local, or county requirements might be. But the way that it's delivered is either it's live and it's an HR professional, or it's an attorney, and your folks are sitting in there with Public Works and Park and Rec. And, your folks are very, hopefully, they're very respectful, but they really do kind of sit back, with our arms folded and say, you don't have a clue what it is to live in our world. You're not talking about us. And we check off the box and say, okay, we went to the training. And then we go back and laugh about the training. Or my favorite one is for those of you that might do it on the computer, Target Solutions or some similar type of a format. It's generally a 2-hour training. One person sitting in front of a computer with some sort of interactive 2-hour training. But you know it and I know it that it's actually 2 hours and 20 minutes, because most of your folks are spending the first 20 minutes trying to defeat it. And when they figure out they can't defeat it, what they do is they'll find a junior firefighter someplace and say, hey kid, come here, press this button. I'm going to be in the gym because I got more important things to do. And the answers to the test, that might be coming up, although a lot of these interactive video ones have gotten better, where they try to mix it up a little bit so one group can't hand the next group the answers. But over a period of time, generally speaking, if I come in and it's my turn for the test, the answers are on a bulletin board someplace. I know that would never happen in any of your agencies. But hopefully, you'll agree with me that based on the consequence, is our training commitment really meeting the consequences? And let me give you a quick drill. Remember that firefighter, that young firefighter that Chief Cummings talked about, that operationally would right away tap the captain on the shoulder and say, hey, there's a problem here. Let's put those two, that same captain, that same supervisor, and that same young firefighter inside a fire station. And the captain pulls out a phone and says, hey, did you see this comedian on HBO last night? This guy's hilarious. Did you see this bit? And it's the N-word, and it's derogatory terms for every one of the protected, and it's funny, you know, ha, 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 you know, blah, 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 and all that stuff is going out there. How long would it take that junior firefighter in that environment to say, hey, Captain, you know, I don't really think we are supposed to be showing that here in the fire station. And you know, and I know that that young firefighter is never going to say a word about that. Generally speaking, is never going to say a word about that. And actually the drill right there, that tabletop drill, it's not for the young firefighter, it's for every one of your frontline supervisors. You know, because every one of your frontline supervisors undoubtedly is way more likely to get fired than they are to be killed in the line of duty. This type of behavior is the number one thing that's going to lead to that happening. And there's zero expectation in the work environment that anybody would step up and say, hey, this isn't such a good idea, right? I know that we're not the first one to tell you this, but you have to understand, right, that you're in the middle of a cultural paradigm shift that we'll discuss in just a little bit.
So I'm not even sure what this picture is, what they're responding to, some methyl ethyl bad stuff there. But I know that if you and one of your crews responded out to this, I'd have a high level of operational confidence that you and your crew would be as safe as they reasonably can be, because you're professional firefighters. You're well trained, well equipped. You've got SOPs for handling that, and you know how to get there, handle that dangerous situation, and get everyone home.
Right. So if that tanker overturns, right, and your folks are going up on it, and it's got a placard, let's say, someplace on it, right, and they said, oh, that's that HAZ-MAT stuff. They're going to go right in their training mode. They're going to recognize all the dangers, and they're going to respond to it. But let's take it back to administrative confidence. Is that crew as safe as it can be related to the workplace? Because that kid, Brian came up with this a while ago. What's your KTS, your kitchen table status? And how you establish the kitchen table status is what's being said or shown at the kitchen table versus what's your expectation of a professional work environment. Let me give you an example that that's just a crew enjoying a meal, and that television is up on a shelf there, and it's on network news. It's not cable or anything else. It's just network news. And a story comes on network news a couple of years ago, and it's about Bruce Jenner becoming Caitlyn Jenner. What's your confidence right there? What's your KTS right there? Is there a chance that some of the conversation might start to wander a little bit? Let's change it up. It's Sunday, we're watching football, and there's athletes that are kneeling from the national anthem. Do you think that maybe some of your folks might have something to say about that? Could those conversations, take any political thing that's going on in the world right now? Right now, I know what you're thinking as Chief says, we're going to tear all the television sets, out of it. No, listen, it's insane to think that we can, sanitize the work environment. And as we discussed before, we're not trying to sanitize it. What we're trying to do is clean it up. These are trash can fires. If I say something about Bruce Jenner becoming Caitlyn Jenner, I say something about kneeling for the flag, and I throw in some sort of derogatory comment, it's a trash can fire. Who in that group is prepared to step up and say, hey, okay, we can talk about, whatever we want to talk about. We can have, debates, but your folks don't debate. Your people going for the kill. And then it gets, it starts to escalate. Somebody in the room has to understand that this is becoming more than a trash can fire, right? And let's make sure that we put this out. I know that, again, I'm not the first one to tell you this, but you're well into a rapidly developing and career-threatening cultural paradigm shift about what's acceptable behavior inside the fire station. But those of you who've been around for a while, you know that it's not your first cultural paradigm shift. It's not going to be your last. It's just the next in sequence.
No, the public's expectation of our inside the fire station culture has been changing and evolving since the inception of the fire service. One of the big paradigm shifts in my time on the job was if you walked into a fire station anywhere in the country before the mid 80s, it looked a little bit different than it looks today. You'd find posters on the wall, adult magazines laying around in locker rooms, inappropriate displays and cartoons on the refrigerator, because that's just the environment we lived in. It was against policy back then, but we didn't care. It was our fire station. We were going to do what we wanted. Well, then some in the late 80s, early 90s, depending on where you are in the country, chief officers walked into all of our stations and said, hey guys, the posters come down, get the magazines out of here, take that stuff off the refrigerator. It's inappropriate. This is a public building. We're going to maintain a professional work environment. That was the first time they bandied that term around, professional work environment. And in most of our stations, that stuff came down and it stayed down. But in maybe 10, 15% of our fire stations, the second the chief walked out, we put them off with both hands and put that stuff back up. Because this is the officer we worked for back then. Chief can't walk into my house, tell me what to do in my fire station. I don't care what the rule says. That stuff's always been here. It's always going to be here. I got a First Amendment right. Somebody call the union. Well, that captain is wrong, and he's gone and retired. And slowly, in fits and starts, over 20, 25 years, we changed the professional work environment we have in our fire stations today. To the point of, if one of our new employees came in on their first day and said, hey, let's put this inappropriate poster on the wall, we'd go, no, we don't do that here. And we wouldn't see that whole struggle that it took to get to that point. Well, we don't really have 10, 20, or 25 years to make this shift. We're losing good firefighters every day now to things that come into our station on telephones, on computer screens, to these work environment and these harassment issues. We have to recognize the danger in those things and respond to it by saying, hey, I'm not going to participate in it. And then let's go this further step and toss our crew member a life preserver and say, hey, you shouldn't either because it's dangerous to your career. It's like the safety briefing on the airplanes. When the masks fall, put the mask on yourself first and then put it on the person you're with. The same thing here. Hey, I'm not going to participate in that, and you really shouldn't either because it's dangerous to your career. Realize if someone is handing you that mask, the plane is in peril, and you ignore that at your peril. We've got to make that shift. And it comes down to a question, are we going to be the person leading this paradigm shift, or are we going to be the person there with the smoking the cigarette? Is this going to be us when people talk about how we address these issues that comes up? You know, the fire service at our best, all of us in our Class A's, marching with a single goal and a single purpose. And when we're like this, we tell folks, you know what? Get your kids, put them on your shoulders. You don't want to miss this. Your fire department's marching by. Or are we going to be this? Are we going to be the clowns? Because in every parade, there's clowns. This is the other uniform we have in our locker, and we know that we're one headline away. We're one scandal away from our agency being on the front page of our local news in the clown outfit. And sometimes it takes a generation for us to get out of that. And being in that clown outfit, it affects the careers and the work experience of our employees. It affects our ability to do our job. It affects our budgets, our funding, the apparatus we have, and the way we provide public safety. We have to decide, each of us have to decide that we're going to be the best that the fire service is, and we're going to lead this paradigm shift from the front. And that's why we want to focus on our frontline supervisors. Eric and I feel this is the most critical role in any fire service agency. No one has more to do with the success of our fire departments and our frontline supervisors than our captains and our lieutenants. They have far more to do with the success of our agencies than we as fire chiefs ever could, because they're with the men and women of our agencies 24/7. In their work environments, the tone they set and the things they allow, that becomes the policies for our people. And the things they disallow, that becomes the rules for our folks. Absent an officer of superior rank, they're making every decision for our fire service agency. And it's as if the fire chief himself or herself is sitting in the cab of that rig, or is at that incident, or sitting in that office if he has one of our officers there, because our authority is delegated down directly to them. There's no way we can overstate the importance of their role, both operationally and administratively, keeping our folks safe. And our agencies are only as strong as our weakest frontline supervisor. To put it another way, using this org chart, we as fire chiefs, we get to decide the big picture stuff, mission, vision, values, and where are we going as an agency on this bus road trip that we call our fire service career. Well, in that scenario, the rest of the chief officers, their job is to make sure that the firefighters have everything they need to get to where we as fire chiefs want them to go. Enough seats on the bus, lunches, Thomas guide, that's GPS for all of our young folks. Everything we need to get to that goal of where our fire chief wants us to go. Now, everybody else, the firefighters, the medics, the engineers, driver operators, support staff, admin staff, they're the tires on the bus. They don't get to decide where we're going, how fast we're going, or where we turn, but make no doubt about it, our agencies move forward based on their work. But it's those frontline supervisors, those captains and those lieutenants. They're the ones behind the wheel. They're the ones driving that bus down the road on this road trip. And it's their commitment and dedication to come in every day and steer us safely down the road using our rules and our policies as their Thomas guide. And then looking down road to avoid those road hazards of things like hostile work environment or inappropriate comments, discriminatory actions that keeps our folks safe. And when they hit those little lane dividers, those little turtles, that's that real-time coaching and counseling want them to do. Hey, knock it off. Hey, we don't do that here. Hey, that's inappropriate in the workspace. Their commitment to doing that keeps our folks safe and makes sure we arrive to where we want to go.
Now, when we take this, and let's say, and I'm going to beat this metaphor to death, but you're the chief and you say you have a vision of where you want this agency to go. And you say, you know what, I want to go to Las Vegas. And all your folks go, yeah, I like Vegas. Let's go to Vegas. Well, a lot of our officers and even our employees think it's a party bus. You know, we get to work and I can't, because look at who we hire, that type A personality. Let's go get it. You know, the reason that people want to become firefighters, and we're coming to work because we just, you know, let's go hit those fires. Let's do our thing. But it's important, especially that our officers understand that, you know, it's a great job and absolutely we should be having fun doing it. But also there are many risks, and this isn't the party bus. That's not, you know, my job. It isn't the party bus. What we ask your captains to think about for the next 24, 48, what you guys come to work, what, Brian, once every 28 days or something like that, when your guy shows up to work. So, but anyway, whenever they do show up, go to the gym for 6 or 7 hours. Well, cops are saving lives. Come on, Brian, that's funny.
Have a donut.
Have a donut. See, now I'm off track again. Anyway, when we get to work and your captain, your frontline supervisor is assuming responsibility for this next shift, that they consider it like their family's on the bus and their family is on this bus. And it's their ability to understand, you know, yeah, they've all been on road trips before, but you know what? There's certain parts of this trip that are really dangerous. We can anticipate during the next shift, while that captain, that lieutenant's in charge of this bus, that there could be some dangerous things, certainly operationally, but also administratively. There are some potential hazards out there. So we give them very specific training at that to recognize and respond to it. You know, for your officers, their safety's in the hand. And what Brian and I will hear when we're doing live training almost always is officers will come up to us and say, yeah, I get that, Eric, and I take it real seriously, but you should see what the chiefs get away with. And there's a double standard here. And you should see what those other crews do. And what we always respond to them back is, that means nothing to you and your bus. I can't control any of this. As a matter of fact, what we say is to those other officers is, the officers that talk to us, is all that other stuff going on outside your bus is weather. You can't control that. Turn on the windshield wipers, protect you and your crew, and just move forward. Don't look at this issue globally. Look at this issue for the next 24 hours. You know, the next 48 hours, because again, most of you in this room, you've got some time on the job, and think about how fast that career is gone. It's a shift, another shift, and all of a sudden you've got 20 years on the job. Get my folks from point A to point B safely. But just like Brian talked about, let's say you're a good driver and you're moving along and everything's going okay. From time to time, you'll hit those little lane dividers. Now we put those lane dividers in there so you'll recognize the danger, right? It's a little bit of a subtle reminder. We don't expect your people to pull the bus over. They're, you know, just make the correction. Somebody comes in and says, boop, or they show a display. There's no reason in the world to pull that bus over, even slow down. All it is make a minor correction and get back inside the lane. Hey, you know what? We're better now. We don't talk like that here. Hey, you know what? We don't show that stuff here. And just keep your eyes down road. Don't have to make a big change. However, if you play it all the way out, what if they don't make the change? What if they just keep on going straight? You know, and they're over the lane dividers. Eventually, they're going to be in a different lane. They're still going to be heading towards Vegas, but they're going to be in a different lane. And again, if they don't make those changes, depending on how fast they're going and what the road looks like, eventually that bus is in the ditch. And I will tell you, and you know this to be true, and I would tell every supervisor working for you, this is them. This is your frontline supervisor, right? Now, every now and then a car jumps the center divider. There was nothing we can do. But I'll tell you what, you show me a scandal about any fire department anywhere, and I promise you, I'm going to show you frontline supervisors that weren't doing their job. They either fell asleep at the wheel, you know, and ran off the road, or worse, they were like texting and driving and drinking and driving because they were involved in the shenanigans that took us off the road. This doesn't, absolve the rest of the rank and file folks. As soon as the captain hits the little lane divider, if the captain's not making the correction, those folks should be empowered to say, hey, captain, wake up, we're on the lane divider. None of this is easy. We understand that none of this is easy, but through some better training, and we make sure people understand the consequences and get over the complacency. I know every one of the frontline supervisors that shows up to work for you is thinking, nobody on my crew gets hurt today. How long is it going to take us to get that, that paradigm shift that says nobody's getting fired today, not on my watch?
So what does it look like when we take that operational passion to our administrative task? Well, first we start by setting clear expectations early, letting our folks know this is department policy, this is my policy, this is what I expect of us all the time. And then modeling it ourselves as frontline supervisors. Because if it's the frontline supervisor isn't upholding the policy, there's no way that our crews ever would. We want to make sure that our folks are well trained, but we want that crew level training as well. Because I know that if I'm well trained, my operation is going to go well. But if my entire crew is trained well, then each one of us can act as that safety officer. Each one of us can make sure the other is held accountable to having applications in line with expectations. We know that when we work together, we're going to stay safe, because all of us looking at this problem are going to have more eyes on it and have a better ability to catch those little things while they're small and keep them small.
We have some administrative trash can fire tools that are already at your disposal, and we use them operationally all the time. The first is let our systems work. If there are little transgressions, operational transgressions, we fix them. We just get in and fix it. It's not a big, people feel empowered to fix those things. And generally we fix them through coaching and counseling. As a matter of fact, your healthiest operational crews, frequently the officer doesn't have to get involved in it. You might have a younger firefighter that is, a little bit outside the operational expectation, and the other senior firefighters will quickly correct that because everybody's looking out for each other. And then, Brian and I are big proponents of honest evaluations and understanding non-disciplinary documentation as a trash can fire tool. However, our evaluations, depending on what you may or may not do, are all over. Unfortunately, the reality is evaluations today are frequently an 11th hour task that represent a cut and paste version of the last 3 evaluations. And not only are they meaningless, they actually help us. So if we're going to instill this culture of compliance administratively, it's time for us to understand the impact of the tools that we have available for us.
So now we get to the practical application portion of the training. Hey, Cap, can I run something by you? When we're doing this live, I'll usually pick some unsuspecting officer who had the temerity to sit in the back row. And I'll say, hey, Cap, can I run something by you? And that's never good news. That's never someone says, hey, here's that $20 I owe you. It's always something, they're about to relate something to you where either they witnessed something that was outside expectation or did something outside the expectation. So I'll pick that officer and I'll sit down next to him and I'll go, hey, Cap, thanks for talking to me. And I really enjoyed working for this agency the last 6 years. And I've really enjoyed working for you because you've helped me develop myself as a firefighter. And that's why I thought I could bring this to you. And I hardly know where to start, sir. I want to start by saying I don't want anybody to be in trouble here, but I'm just trying to make things a little bit better. And I know that I haven't told anybody in the agency, but I know that the guys must suspect because of the jokes that they tell and some of the displays will be out in the district and someone will say something, even some of the stuff you say, Cap, but Cap, I'm gay. And I don't want anybody in the agency to know, but like I said, I think everybody suspects because of the jokes and all the stuff that I go around all the time here. And I usually let it just roll off my back, but Cap, I took that last promotional examination and I feel like I let you down because you helped me study and I'm the only guy in the agency that failed. And when I was home this weekend, I started thinking about it and I thought, what if the department knows I'm gay and they don't want to promote me because of that? And I thought about it some more and I thought, you know what? What if because of the environment that I have around here and the stuff that I'm subjected to all the time, maybe I couldn't study as well as everyone else? And last week, Cap, I called in sick. I wasn't sick at all, Cap. I was fed up to here. And I thought if I came into work and one of these guys popped off and said something, I was going to hit somebody. And I didn't want to disrespect you or the fire station like that. Cap, I'm throwing a lot of stuff on your desk here and I apologize for that. But I guess it comes down to, I'm just hoping that maybe you can help me out by making it a little bit easier for me to come to work every day by doing your job. How tough is that? How easy could that walk into somebody's office? I've laid every little thing out there that was necessary for that complaint. I talked about the triggering event, that discriminatory thing, that work decision. I didn't get a promotion. And I'm saying it was because of my protected class status. And as evidence, I'm pointing back to 6 years of that drip, 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 jokes, displays, language, things I said, things the captain said, things that were all over my agency that had that pervasive environment. I have every element that I need there to file that complaint in federal lawsuit to sue that captain individually and the entire agency for $10 million in federal court.
So I'm going to be Brian's attorney now. We're going to actually do this lawsuit. Now, it's very difficult to get your hands on depositions from lawsuits and such, and we've managed to, over a period of time, accumulate fire department lawsuits. But this case that Brian just laid out to you is 100% exactly what happened. It was a Los Angeles County case, and we know the people that were involved. It wasn't LA City Fire, but we know the people that were involved. So we got to actually get into the weeds and talk to some of the people that were there. Now, I'm going to go ahead and be the attorney. If that's difficult for you, just picture me sitting here talking to you with no soul, because I don't care about you. I care about my client. I'm going to advocate for my client. So, matter of fact, what I'm going to try to do is paint this picture that, thank goodness me, the attorney, I'm here to protect your community from you cowboys, you rogues, you people that have this culture of hate. And so Brian has filed this suit for $10 million in federal court. His case is discrimination. And actually, that's a really high bar to get to in federal court. We have to be able to show that he didn't receive something that he otherwise merited. And the only reason that he didn't receive it was because of his, he's in a protected class. That's a high bar to get to. But I know what's going to support my case if I can show what's called a culture of indifference, a culture of hate inside this agency. And we're going to support the idea of discrimination based on a pervasive and hostile work environment, not just in one station, but it's prevalent across the entire agency. I'm trying to establish, again, what's called a culture of indifference. We're about to head into what's called the civil deposition process, and I'm assuming many of you have been through this before. But those of you that haven't had the pleasure, basically what the civil deposition process is everything gets played out in a conference room. There's no judge or no jury, but everything gets played out in a conference room, the whole case basically. And it's kind of how they keep all the knucklehead stuff out of court. So then we can get, everybody's testimony in, all the documents in, and then your attorney will write a brief for a judge saying, we want to throw out the whole thing. It's frivolous. It's called a motion of summary judgment. Throw it out. And me, representing the client, I'm going to say, I want the jury to hear all of it. Because remember, I know the jury is sympathetic to my client. And then the judge gets to decide what, if anything, the jury might hear. Interestingly, most fire department cases actually don't make it to a jury. Most of them get settled because by the time we get into the weeds about what's going on inside the fire station, people realize we can't win it. And remember, you as the chief and your agency, you have very little to do with what's going to happen here. Mostly it's all going to be up to an insurance company attorney and whoever your legal representative is. And it's a dollars and cents thing. Can we win it or can't we? What's important for your folks to understand is win, lose, or draw the lawsuit. After the lawsuit is over and millions of dollars walk out, you as the chief, you're going to be, if you've survived this, you're going to be left with facts that were gathered under sworn testimony, and your employees, their careers will be left based on those facts. Were they meeting agency expectations commensurate with pay? That's why officers are frequently laid out in this. We try to impress upon people, you can lose a lawsuit, but keep your job. Just make sure that the testimony shows that you were doing your job. So here's how this plays out in court. The first thing, to get to a culture of indifference, the first thing that I want to establish is what's called your public culture. Your public culture is paperwork. Do you have a policy? You do. Do you have training records? Probably you do. And it's tough to get, but I'm going to try to get the pay, usually electronically posted pay stubs for the highest ranking officers that were alleged to have been around any of the inappropriate behavior at any time. That's your what do you tell people? If somebody says, hey, what does your agency do when it comes about the workplace? We say, oh, you know, we have a policy, we train to the policy, and I have supervisors in every one of my locations whose responsibility it is to make sure that we're adhering to the policy, public culture. Next, I'm going to establish your actual culture. And the actual culture is sworn testimony, pain and penalty of perjury testimony. Is it possible that there might be a little bit of a gap between your public culture and your actual culture? Usually there is, sometimes a pretty significant gap. And it's that gap that establishes the culture of indifference. I've made that culture of indifference green because that's where my money's at. Because this is what it looks like to our public. This is what we tell people we do. This is what we get paid to do, but this is what we really do. You know, it's sinister. And remember, the jury is sympathetic to the client, to the employee. Now, for those who, again, I believe most of you have been through a civil deposition process, but for those that haven't, again, it's usually like my office, a conference room. And your folks will get called in and they'll have an attorney there with them. They'll be subpoenaed, but they need to know, and you need to know, obviously, it's not your attorney, it's the attorney for the agency. They're not there to advocate for you or protect you. They're representing your agency, your community, and they're basically just, you know, evaluating, assessing you, what you would look like as a witness on the stand. I'm the attorney, I'm gonna be asking you questions, horns, breathing fire. The person suing you will be sitting next to me, and that throws you and your folks off, you know, because you hate this person now, but you know, you feel, boy, they threw rat, you know, they broke ranks. Why didn't they just come to me and tell me what was going on? You know, we could have made this better. And you feel like, and plus you're mad because they maybe even told the jokes. Maybe they even did some stuff. And you really, but you also know that they know the answers to all the questions you're about to get asked, and you're under oath. You know, it throws you off. And just to tweak you a little bit more, I'm going to point a video camera at you, and you and everybody that works for you, when you're testifying, you're going to be watching yourself testify on a big screen television set. You know, I've been in this chair. It's horrible. It's just horrible. So the first person generally to come in, you know, to testify, you know, keep in mind that I've got all these questions to ask you because the person that's suing you came to my office before all this got started, and we sat for hours with a court reporter, and they went through every single anecdote, right? What was said, what was shown, who said it, who showed it. Most importantly, who was the highest ranking person there, and what, if anything, did they do to put out the fire? You know, frequently we'll have your frontline supervisors there, but if I can get a chief officer in, ka-ching. The higher up the food chain you go, the more money for me, because it continues to show the corruption. That's the definition of corruption. You know, as the highest members of the agency not doing what they're getting paid to do is the definition of corruption. So I've got all this stuff, you know, and now I'm going to call the chief in, because generally the chief is the first person to testify, because you as the chief, you weren't there for the fire. Why would you be at a trash can fire? And basically what I'm going to ask you is, hey, chief, would you describe your expectation of a professional work environment? Now, obviously, I don't know any of you, but I bet you're going to respond with something along the lines of, every one of my work environments are free of any sort of discriminative, harassing behavior. Every one of my work environments will provide every one of my employees with the opportunity to thrive. And I believe that you mean that. It's important, you know, when we talk about that, to understand what a work environment is. A work environment is anywhere any of your folks are at work. We're using this picture here for you. I don't know if you can all see it, but there's a picture there of a guy driving one of the fire engines. And because Brian and I are reading a case here in California, and what we've got so far is about what's being said on the rig and the headsets, because that's a work environment. Does anybody ever say, hey, we're not supposed to talk like that in this rig? Because that's a taxpayer purchased, you know, resource, and it is a work environment. Chief, before I let you go, could you please tell me what it is that the captain or the frontline supervisor's responsibility is in the fire station? And the answer to that question is pretty simple. Absent an officer of superior rank, your lieutenants, your captains, they're you. They're the chief. They're making every decision for that agency, for your agency, in those environments, if there's not an officer of superior rank. So you could go over to one of your stations at night and have dinner with everybody. As soon as you leave, if you have a lieutenant or captain in there should be no difference in the conversation, no difference in what's on television, no difference whatsoever, right? Because they're you. Now, You're done. And now I'm going to get your rank and file folks, right? Hey, did you tell the joke? Did you show the display? And generally speaking, your folks aren't going to lie. They might, there's a little bit of a situational amnesia that we recognize sometimes, because your folks will say, because I'll ask them, did you tell the joke? And they'll say, yeah, I told the joke. But then I'll say, was there an officer there? And they'll sound like police officers on the stand. I have no independent recollection, if anybody was there or not, because they don't want to throw the person under the bus. And I understand that. And me as the attorney, I really don't care, because your captain's not going to lie, right? So we'll go through all that different stuff. Sometimes what your folks will do too is they're thinking they're going to protect your agency. They go after the person that's suing because they're in the room. Well, you should see what that guy did. He told jokes. He showed videos. He did this. And that's just money in the bank for me, because I'm going to sit back and go, what else did he do? Oh, what else did he do? And as soon as they're done with their rant, I'm going to ask them, where was the captain? That was a trash can fire. Why didn't the captain tell that person to stop? That it's language and displays. It's not who's saying it. We don't care who started the fire. The captain's job, the supervisor's job is to put out the fire. Now, this is almost verbatim. I personally know the captain that was involved in this lawsuit. This is almost verbatim his testimony when he gets sworn in. The plaintiff's attorney says, Captain, I've got the sworn testimony from 10 employees that says for the last 24 months, on almost every shift in your presence, there were these multiple violations of your workplace environment expectations that you never responded to and frequently added to. Captain, I'm going to go ahead and show you your policy related to the workplace. And they laid the policy in front of him. Now, many of you are familiar with Gordon Graham and his Lexapol, which is the be-all, end-all when it comes to baseline policies for police departments and fire departments. Well, this agency is a Lexapol agency, and this is the Lexapol policy. And the plaintiff's attorney highlighted this out for the supervisor to read. It says supervisor responsibility, and the guy had to read A, continually monitoring the work environment and striving to ensure it's free from all types of unlawful discrimination, including harassment. A definition of harassment, right, is prevalent behavior. And then secondly, taking prompt and appropriate action. Prompt and appropriate is the key there. Prompt and appropriate action within their work units to avoid and minimize the incidence of any form of discrimination or harassment. Harassment being prevalent behavior. When they talk about prompt and appropriate behavior, all they're talking about is all we need to see from that captain is, hey, knock it off, we don't do that here. That's prompt and appropriate behavior. But our captains, because of bad training, think as soon as somebody says something, because of bad training, we've got to take this and give it to HR type of a thing. So the captain had to read that about prompt and appropriate behavior, right? So, okay. And you didn't do that, did you? Well, right? There's nowhere to go with that. Say, okay, Captain, so you know what this policy is. Captain, I'm going to show you your training records now. This shows that electronically that you've been in Target Solutions multiple times, every other year, whatever it might be. Is that accurate that you've had this training? Yes. Captain, have you ever ordered or asked someone else to sit down at the computer and advance the slides for you? Captain, have you ever been provided with answers to whatever pending tests there might be? Captain, have you ever provided answers to whatever pending tests there might be? And if the answer to any of those questions is yes, you and your folks better be ready for about another hour of testimony related to cheating, because that's the question. So it's okay to cheat. Why would you do so? You don't take this serious, right? Obviously you don't care about this type of stuff. There's a culture of indifference. That's going to be at least another hour of testimony. Then Captain, the last part is I'm going to show you your pay, your electronically posted pay. Did you give any of that money back? This is the last 24 months when all this stuff has allegedly been going on. Did you give any of the money back? No. And then the plaintiff's attorney asked him this, Captain, these 10 other employees that came in to testify, did they lie? Did they perjure themselves? Or is it more likely, Captain, that you've been stealing money from this agency, this community, because you haven't been doing a thing you got paid to do to protect this community? Where do we go with that, right? Well, wait a minute. We're just blowing this all out of proportion. It's just something we do in the fire station. Ka-ching. Who's the we in that conversation? You all have a group of homophobes? I haven't seen the we exception. you know, in your policy. No, 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 it's a really stressful job. You know, PTSD, it's a real thing. You know, so we dust each other up just a little bit, you know, to blow off some steam. You know, ka-ching. Could you please tell me what it is about using prohibitive language related to protected classes that is somehow or another stress reducing to you? No, no, that's not what I mean. Listen, it's good for morale. You know, we have unit citations for operational excellence. We're a great team. We work hard, we play hard. I like it when my guys are dusting each other up. They do it like brothers and sisters, you know, and it's good for morale. It's how I keep my thumb on the pulse of the morale of my team. Yeah, how did it work out for the morale of my guy who's suing you for $10 million? So the morale of your employees, except for your gay employee, that's important to you? Oh, no, no, no. I didn't even know the guy was gay. Ka-ching. Can you please show me anywhere in your policy where it says that you have to know that the protected class is in the environment before you start putting out trash can fires? Doesn't say that anywhere, right? In this conversation right now, I'll ask you, do you know if I'm Muslim? You can assume that I'm not, but do you know? And actually, like Chief Cummings said, in a work environment, it's against the law to ask me the question. I wish we could make this easier. And please understand, Chief Cummings and I both understand that this isn't easy. This cultural paradigm shift is not easy. But at the end of the day, where would you or your captains be if somebody came to walk in to have that conversation saying, hey, you know what? I'm something you didn't know I was, and I think I'm being discriminated against. Now, the testimony that we're trying to get through training, because we can't ever stop the lawsuit from coming. You know, that's not our goal. We'd like to stop the lawsuit, but if it does, we want our employees under examination to say, yeah, I told a joke, because from time to time, those jokes are going to be told. Yes, I showed a display, because realistically, from time to time, those displays are going to be shown. But what we want the testimony, the actual testimony to be is, yeah, I did tell the joke, but the captain told me to knock it off right away. The lieutenant told me to knock it off right away. Because if that's the testimony, your captains and crews aren't in my lawsuit. Because remember, my client came and told me, oh yeah, a guy told a joke. Well, then what happened? The supervisor shut it down. If that's the real testimony, that team, that crew is not in my lawsuit because the supervisor wasn't indifferent. The supervisor acted. They met the culture, and then they're out of it. The bigger issue that we're going to have moving forward, once you and your agencies have impacted this cultural paradigm shift, is what's your expectation of how many bites at the apple you're going to let your folks get before you have your captain or your supervisor bring the person up a notch because they're no longer a trash can fire. Right? But at least if your captain has to deliver that person to an officer and say they're not a trash can fire, your captain can give you anecdotally at least how they tried to put that fire out, and they just can't get it. We hope through more meaningful training, crew level training, that it won't get to that point.
As we wrap up here, I want to do a quick explanation of the Harass-MAT decal. It's kind of a job aid to help our supervisors as they scan their environment. And much like the 704 diamond, each of the colors of triangles and the numbers mean something. With the red triangle at the top, that's the severe and unwanted behavior. And usually we catch those. That should usually stay at 0 because, again, if someone tells us they don't like something or someone does something egregious, we usually catch that and we handle it really quickly. The yellow triangle, though, is one that we really have to watch. That's that harmless banter and displays. That's the place where we've got to keep tamping out those small fires as they crop up. The blue triangle is the normalization of deviance. If we have anything that we're routinely doing that's outside of policy, that's against rules, let's stop doing it as quickly as we can as soon as we identify those things. And then the most important triangle is the one in the middle. That's supervisor accountability or lack thereof. If we have supervisor accountability and that one's a 0, then it's going to bring all those other numbers down to 0 pretty quickly. And again, 0 meaning it's not occurring, all the way up to 3 means it's regularly occurring and we're rarely doing anything to correct it. And then if we have these around our environment, from time to time, our captains should scan their environment and add up their score. If they add up their score, next slide here. Hear that? Oh, there we go. If you get a 0 to a 2, that's a professional work environment. Things are popping up as they will, but they're putting out the small fires and they're not letting anything become pervasive. If you have a 3 to a 5, I'd argue you already have a hostile worker environment, and it's merely going to take one of those triggering events, some discriminatory action, some falling out in a relationship that could bring this forward as a complaint. And if you're at 6 to 12, my best advice would be get an attorney, and you have some major work that you need to do. And if we put these around our environment, like I said, these reminders, just so that we scan our environment, we look for those things, and we're staying on top of it. Just like we're always watching out for those hazards on scene at emergency, here we're watching out for those hazards when we're on scene in our work environment.
I think, Brian, unless you've got something up, that kind of wraps us up for right now. These stickers are available. You can get a hold of us through the association. Misha has all of my contact information. I should have put a phone number on there. I'm blaming you for that, Brian. Should have had a phone number on there. And at the website, careersurvivalgroup.com, you can get a hold of us. We appreciate it. The other, a little bit of a pitch for us is we have another class that we do that encompasses all of the career survival things. The top reasons, including things like social media, why firefighters are getting fired. But again, we like to take it a little bit farther and say, not just identifying this is what's happening, but provide tools on how to overcome it. You've all heard predictable, preventable. What we like to think is we're actually a little bit more about the preventable side, not just saying this is bad, but this is what we can do about it. We're always happy. We're a little bit bummed that we can't actually be there. And you're probably bummed that it's not actually a conference that you're at right now. But like I said, we travel all over the country and we do this training live. And we're certainly available as things start to open up a little bit. We can't wait to get back out on the road and start doing what we do. But thank you all very much for your time. Brian, you should have the last sign off because you are the chief.
Thank you very much for all your time, ladies and gentlemen. Please be safe out there. And again, go to our website. And when the world opens up again, we'd love to come out to your departments and speak with your folks. Be safe.
Well, we do have a question for you, though.
Nice. We'll be right here. We're happy to stick around for a while.
Okay. How do you create a DEI group for recruiting purposes or otherwise if you can't ask protected class affiliation in the work environment?
I would ask what's the purpose of knowing what difference is it going to make the protected class affiliation for that DEI in the first place? Yeah, whoever was that asked the question, what is it that you're trying to get out of the question? I don't know, Brian, do you have
I have the same thing. Is that a critical piece of information that you have to have in order to pick people on that team? Hello, anybody?
Yeah, I don't think it's a webinar, so I'm not quite sure they can go.
Okay.
It's just.
Yeah, that would be my question because again, in any hiring practices or selecting someone for an assignment or building a team, it's illegal to use protected class status as a selector or a deselector. So what you do is you say, we're establishing this team to do this particular thing. We're looking for people that are interested in that. And you interview people and find out if they have the pertinent background or the attitude, the skill set that you need in order to do it. You can't. Go ahead.
I'm guessing that the person asking the question knows that as well. So there's probably a little bit more nuance to the question that we're just not picking up on. So if you can, again, email it or, it's a little bit tough on this side because I'm guessing there's a little bit more to the question.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, it's a little more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And we do have HR in our city attorney's office that we're starting to go down this road to broach this subject in an effort to, in a positive manner, make sure that we're doing the right things within our organization to make sure that we're compliant, respectful, and have a good work environment for all employees. But we're a small organization, and so is it just generalized conversation with all staff after we've created the sort of concept for where we want to go with a DEI type, I'm not going to call it a committee, but an effort, and just sort of throw it out there and then see who's interested. We have several members that are of a certain class that we are interested in making sure that, it's an awkward conversation because you have certain people that we're getting directions from other higher level authorities to make sure we're doing certain things. And so it creates this awkward situation of, okay, well, how do you have that conversation with staff then?
Yeah, Chief, I'm assuming you're a chief, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question, Chief. And I'm going to jump in, then I'm getting out of the way because Brian is obviously more of an expert at it. But what we've come across and you're coming across is the fact that there is, not that you get a pass or anything like that, but this incredibly unique situation that is modern fire service. And then what happens is there's somebody from HR or somebody else that starts to tell you as the chief what you need to accomplish and how you need to accomplish it.
Correct. Yes.
And you're thinking, what you're telling me is counterintuitive to the 30-something years I have on this job. I'm not trying to say I don't agree with what it is that we're trying to accomplish. It's the methodology given this unique situation. Don't tell me how to do it. You know, give me the mission and let me accomplish the mission. That said, I believe where we're heading with a conversation is like this is, what's the mission? And if you believe that the mission would be better suited with representation, you know, across the board of the diversity that is your agency or your community, that you would at least, as you're putting that community together, look at the ability, the aptitude, and the diversity within your applicant group as you start to make the decisions. But the fact that they are or aren't in that diverse group wouldn't necessarily be your number one criteria for selecting, because you want to accomplish the goal. Does that make sense?
It does. And yeah, that's very helpful. So I appreciate that. It's just, you know, keeping it more.
Brian, you want to throw into that?
Yeah, and you know, LA City is not a great example because there's so many people, there's so many different folks to pull into, but we have within Los Angeles City different employee groups for the city itself and for the within the fire department that represent a lot of those protected classes. So as we were putting together our DEI teams, we talked to those specific groups of employees, whether it was the African American Firefighters Association, the Women in the Fire Service, the Latinx Firefighter Association. We talked to those groups that had their specific issues and said, hey, we'd like you to be part of this as we move forward, as well as casting a wider net to everyone in the agency and saying, this is our goal. Our mission and our goal of this group is to accomplish this. If you are interested in providing input and assisting us with this, we'd like to interview you and make you part of this team. That way you're catching the specific protected classes and individuals that are represented in their groups, but you're also casting it out for everyone. So you're not selecting specifically because of or inclusion in one of the groups or not in one of the groups.
Chief, can I throw in just one other quick idea, is that whatever the group is going to be, start thinking early about what the success matrix might be, and including everybody in the success matrix. That, you know, are there complaint, you know, a certain number of complaints come in or whatever it might be, and we're trying to reduce those by doing this, or we're trying to do a more broad reach, we're recruiting, whatever it might be. Start the best we can to establish some baseline numbers, you know, and then whatever you know, form your team takes, then at least you can start to see whether or not we have to start adjusting the makeup of the form because we are or not meeting those agreed upon matrix. We had a relatively large East Coast agency that wanted Brian and I to come in and do agency-wide training on Harass-MAT, and it got shut down by HR. And HR said, we don't like them calling it Harass-MAT training. We want it to be called sensitivity training, and it has to be taught by 2 females. And the chief was saying, you know, you're really putting me in a box that is going to lead that it might not be as successful as it might be. And the HR people were fierce about it, saying, no, it has to be called sensitivity training and it has to be 2 female instructors. So I don't know where to take a chief on something like that. You know, you work for somebody too. And if that's your direction, you know, the best you can do is say, you have to have confidence in me as I'm telling you, you know, this may not work this way, but at the end of the day, I work for somebody.
No, I appreciate those comments. And I just want to add, our son is in one of the service academies, and we were fortunate to sit in on a webinar recently about their minority association and DEI efforts, and the superintendent of the service academy gave it an extremely thoughtful and well did a very good job with his presentation and just explaining how they are addressing these issues within the secondary. And it was nice to hear that the biggest component is this is a long haul. This is not something that's going to get done. You know, it's not reactionary. We have to be thoughtful and plan this out. And so along with your guys' comments today and with that seminar that I viewed recently as well, I just appreciate your comments and what you guys put together and just how this stuff needs to be thoughtfully, thoroughly planned out and then executed. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the comments, sir. We really appreciate it.
Any other questions? I think we're done for today.
Really appreciate it. And again, if anyone, yeah, through you wants to contact us, you have all our contact information. Please let them know. Thanks for the chance.
Yeah, thank you so much for being with us today. And we will post this recording of this webinar up on our YouTube channel too. So
Brian, did you give her all your SAG information for the, you know, your Screen Actors Guild stuff?
Nice.
I'll email you later.
It's going to go on his IPDM or whatever that thing is.
Stay off my MBD page. Come on. Take care, guys.
All right,
So
thanks.
long.
Bye.